to welcome everybody tonight. Thank you for joining us for our webinar. We're going to discuss compounding pharmacy, the differences of 503A versus a 503B. We're also going to talk a little bit about sort of the history of peptides, what's available with compounding pharmacies. And you'll be able to give us some questions, shoot out some questions, and hopefully we'll have some time to answer at the end. Also, I want to let everybody know that this is a joint webinar between the International Peptide Society and the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And then finally, I want to let everybody know who's joined us that we will be sending the on-demand recording out to all of you who are on in case you have to jump off early. I know there's a fair amount of people who registered who aren't on, so they're not hearing this message, but we definitely will be sending out the on-demand recording within the next 24 to 48 hours when we complete here this evening. So let me take a minute and introduce our speaker that we have this evening. Melissa Stefko is an experienced pharmaceutical and biotechnology professional with a strong background in quality assurance and quality control in aseptic sterile processing. Prior to joining Wells Pharmacy Network, Ms. Stefko served as head of quality with a startup 503B outsourcing pharmacy and gained a strong CGMP understanding throughout previous positions within compounding pharmacies and pharmaceutical manufacturing. Ms. Stefko is an active member of the American Society for Quality as a certified quality auditor and audit chair for her local ASQ chapter. She is a member of Alliance for Compounding and serves on the education committee for APC, which if all of you don't know, that is the nonprofit lobbying body for compounding pharmacies. She is also a member of the Institute of Environmental Sciences and Technology, American Society for Microbiology, Parenteral Drug Association, and again, once again, ICP APC, which is an organization they've recently changed their name. Ms. Stefko regularly engages with regulatory agencies advocating for patient access to compounded medications in innovative medicine. Melissa also is on the faculty for our peptide course. She teaches in our module 1. We do offer a peptide fellowship, in case you're not aware of that, through IPS in partnership with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. She's also serves on the committee of the International Peptide Society, which she's been a great resource, I know for myself in particular, in answering a lot of the questions that we get from all of you. And that's a reason why we think it's really important that we continue to talk about this issue of 503, 50B pharmacies, talk about a little bit about peptides, what's the history, what can be done in compounding, what can't be done. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that long introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining tonight. This is a quick little kind of dive into an overall summary of the difference between 503A and 503B compounding pharmacies. Why does it matter? What's the difference? What's the same? But also, how does it really affect your practice, and how does it really affect ultimately peptides? And as Amy said, that this is more geared towards the peptide module, so we'll be focusing a little bit on that as well. Well, oh, there we go. All right, so compounding pharmacy history. I don't know how many of you watch, period piece TV shows, something like Outlander or something from, the 1700s. Pharmacy was compounding back then. It was, this is your ailment. You go to the apothecary, they mix up a couple different berries or whatever it is that they had, and that was your medicine. So that was always what pharmacy was compounding. And it was, a pro was that it was personalized medicine, which was excellent for a lot of different things going on back then. But the con, of course, is that it's not sustainable. So that's where big pharma comes in. They can scale, they figured out, penicillin, things like that decided that they needed, those types of items on mass scale. So that's where big pharma comes in. And, they've done a really great job as far as coming out with a lot of great commercial products. However, it's not a one size fits all. So compounding has still been out there. It's been out there to help with pediatric doses, for allergies, for a lot of different things, especially mostly for allergies from what I've seen. So it's really been important to have this in the industry, as well as like drug shortage options as well. If there's a mass shortage at one of the facilities that has exclusivity on a very important drug product, this is where compounding can come in and help. Especially, we saw a lot of that during COVID. So, and then in 2012, that's where everything kind of stopped. So, NECC came into play, where, there was one bad actor, and they got greedy and did a lot of different things, which caught the attention of the public, of course, and the FDA, that came in and said, we need to, take a closer look at this, start regulating it a little more closely. So here we're going to start doing the Drug Quality Security Act in 2013, and we're going to outline how this all is going to work going forward. So why the separation? So this lovely photo is what they pulled out of methylprednisone. And the injection that the steroid injection that would go into people's spine. So I think the death toll ended around 68 people directly, and then over 800 people affected, and likely much more than that. I don't know if they continued to monitor after that, but it affected, I would say, thousands of people. So they did have mold in their inside of their drug product, which came from their clean room, and it wasn't maintained, and it was just really inspected by the Board of Pharmacy, which they did what they knew about pharmacy, but I think they were in over their heads. And this is more small scale manufacturing, which is a lot of different aseptic sterility things that weren't widely understood. And that's where the FDA really needed to step in and take over that whole piece of that. So there are two. So what they did in the DQSA, the Drug Quality Security Act, is they decided we're going to make two types of pharmacies, compounding pharmacies. We're going to make a 503A and we're going to make a 503B. So the distinction between the two, in very layman's terms, one is prescription based, which keeps a pharmacy small. The other one you can sell in bulk to clinics, hospitals, and that sort of thing. So your 503A is your traditional compounding pharmacy. This is adding the flavoring to the medicines, the crushing of tablets, making suppositories, that sort of thing. They follow the U.S. Pharmacopoeia 795 and 797, and they're governed by the boards of pharmacy, each state board of pharmacy, with some federal oversight. So FDA does come in and visit these pharmacies. They do issue them observation letters, warning letters. They can do consent decrees. They do have jurisdiction in these areas, but they don't necessarily enforce them as much as the boards would. The board is really kind of the governing body of these types of pharmacies. So and what makes it very difficult is each board of pharmacy, the more licenses you get, each board of pharmacy has their own set of rules. So it becomes very difficult to manage. And this keeps 503A pharmacies quite small, because it becomes extremely difficult to manage all of the reporting requirements, all of the different rules and regulations around each state. So that does inherently create smaller compounding pharmacies, which is ideal for FDA. So 503Bs are like your small scale manufacturers. They're like your very tiny Pfizer, your very tiny Abbott. But there are a lot of exemptions involved. So they do follow the Federal Code of Regulations, 21 CFR 210 and 211. So there's a lot of GMP, good manufacturing practices, the standards that have to be followed, just like your big pharma. But there are a few exemptions that are made, which is mostly paired around not having to do the the NDA process, having a new drug discovery and ANDA, which would include the clinical trials, all of the data, the $2 billion, the 10 years of data to get involved with. So those are some of the exemptions that the FDA does allow to get these products to market much more quickly. So they can be compounded for office use. They can do a lot bigger batches, but they do have to follow all those good manufacturing practices, such as validating equipment, processes, doing stability studies. Is this product going to be stable in an IV bag, refrigerated for 90 days? The shipping of it, how do you monitor the shipping? Is that validated? That sort of thing. So all of those things come into play when it's a 503B. So they are much more strictly governed than a 503A pharmacy is. So a couple little differences you saw in this picture back here. This is an environmental monitoring air sampler. So this is something that would occur during a 503B production lot, not necessarily required for a 503A lot. So this captures the air quality during the time of compounding and can tell a lot about the environment and then ultimately how the drug, the purity, the quality of the drug, ensuring that it's not contaminated with any microbacteria. So little couple differences is it's a lot more lax on the 503A side, where this only has to be done every 6 months. You only have to monitor temperature, humidity, and pressure of the clean room once daily. Whereas a 503B, that environmental monitoring is happening every single batch. The whole room is getting a full environmental monitoring weekly, and then temperature and humidity and pressure are monitored continuously. So this is exactly how it's being followed in for a 503B as it would be in a big pharma facility. The quality system's quite a bit different between the two as well. For our 503As, pharmacists, the bulk of everything kind of falls on the pharmacist. So the pharmacist acts as quality. They can check their own work. It's kind of, the pharmacist is the end all be all. And then in the industry, there's a heavy reliance on vendors to provide guidance. So there's a lot of 503A facilities that don't understand chemistry or stability studies or shipping studies and things of that nature. So they'll outsource these and go to a third-party lab or a third-party shipping logistics company and ask them, hey, what do? We don't know. So this is where things can get very hairy in a 503A situation, because you're basically leaning on somebody that doesn't have any skin in the game as far as the regulatory piece of it. So you can get some false advice. You can, it could be overselling, underselling. It's really up to them and their interpretation of the regulation rather than having their own quality system. Whereas 503B is, again, a lot like big pharma. It's a lot of quality. It's heavily quality control driven, quality assurance. You have a regulatory team. There's a lot of investigations. And then ultimately the buck stops with quality. So no product is released without a quality signature. And these are your microbiologists, your chemists, your regulatory, your quality people. So it passes through a lot of different hands. So the product is checked much more thoroughly by a lot of different areas with different expertise. And then we talked a little bit about stability as well. So in a 503A facility, if a batch is less than 25 units, you don't technically have to perform sterility testing on it or endotoxin testing, which can be a little bit scary for some of these smaller mom and pops. They typically are doing batches that small. At Wells, we're a very large 503A, and we're seen as a very large 503A by FDA. So they do have a little bit more jurisdiction over us because we do have such large batches and things that we are doing. So this is something that's always performed with us, and that we would always do for every single sterile drug product that a batch that we create. Potency testing is not required. There's not a whole lot of testing on non-sterile products, and You can give a beyond use date of a drug product just based on guidances or literature or pharmacist judgment. Some states do require stability studies, and they are getting a little more strict with it. So Florida Board of Pharmacy will just require you to do potency over time, for example, whereas California Board of Pharmacy requires full stability studies. They have to be stability indicating, which means you have to perform multiple degradation tests on it to ensure that that method is accurate. So that's it. It really varies between states, and that gets very difficult to manage when you're a small scale pharmacy. When you go into a 503B setting, again, it's a lot of testing. It's a lot of what you would see in a big pharma setting. It's the sterility endotoxin, total microbial count. If it's a non-sterile product, you would be doing particulates. A lot of these different tests to make it a lot more of a robust product to be able to release. And then you have these stability studies that actually prove that over time in this exact container that this product is exactly what the label claim is throughout its product life. So getting into the peptides a little bit, I think we all kind of know what a biologic is from the science perspective. And, we think back to what we learned in college in biology is we kind of thought of it, it's an organic product. Or an organic byproduct at minimum. So anything that would be like blood, a protein, serum, toxin, all of those things would be, some sort of byproduct of a living thing. So that's kind of how we've thought about biologic. However, FDA has recently updated what they decided is a biologic. So in 2009, they updated it, the definition to say, okay, we're going to include a protein as that, which is great, fine. They allowed protein as being part of the biologic, which didn't change a whole lot. But then in early 2020, they decided that they're going to include in that definition any synthesized proteins will now be a biologic, which kind of goes against what we learned of it being from kind of an organic material. So synthesized proteins are now biologics. Okay, well, now what's a protein, FDA? So they said, okay, well, we'll define that too for you. Any amino acid sequence that's 40 or more, or greater than 40, so 41 or more, is going to be a protein. 40 or less, we'll just call those amino acids. And that's where they came in and said, now how we're going to tie this together is compounding pharmacies inherently cannot do biologic products. That's already in the law. So if it's 41 amino acids or more, we're going to call that a protein, which is a biologic. Therefore, compounding pharmacies cannot do it. If it's 40 or less peptides, amino acid peptide, we'll allow them to do it. So this is kind of where they tied everything together. But just to give you an idea of the amount, the focus of not, the focus of the lack, I would say the lack of focus of doing peptides in a commercial setting. So having these as going through the clinical trials, going through the IRB, going through the NDA process, and all of those between 2015 and 2019, total 208 new drugs were brought to market in that whole process, that 2 billion 10-year time span that takes to bring a drug to market. But only 15 of them were peptides. So that's where the focus is really lacking on these peptides. And that's where compounding pharmacy has come in, because physicians have realized anecdotally that these peptides are the way of the future for a lot of personalized medicine. And we've seen the effects of it. And although it hasn't been studied in a formal setting of a clinical trial and through a process such as an NDA, we've seen how beneficial it is to a lot of different patients. So it's been kind of an anecdotal sort of practice that has been occurring these last couple of years. So that's why A4M is really getting involved in helping kind of bring this more to light so that we can move forward and continue to protect peptides. So there's this other really fancy document that FDA came out with as well, and they call it the bulk drug substance list. So in a perfect world, this is how the FDA would see a 503B compounding pharmacy. They would get a bottle of morphine from Hospira, finished drug product, they would break it down into a syringe, or they would break it down and add it to an IV bag of NS, something of that nature. That is what they want to see. That is their dream. That is what they think that compounding pharmacies should do. And then also help when there's a drug shortage, which we saw multiple of during COVID, especially midazolam was a big one. So unfortunately, this isn't what many compounders are doing. There's probably, I would say, 5 doing this in the industry, and where a lot of the compounders are taking the bulk raw material that, a Pfizer or Abbott or somebody would get as well, and we're creating our own. So they created this bulk drug substance list where they said, okay, if that's the route that you're going to go, you need to nominate all of these drugs. You need to nominate the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and say, all right, I would like, for example, to do PT 141. I would like to do this, so I'm going to nominate it. So that includes having to nominate the clinical need for this, some studies around it, show that it's safe, show that that it's been used previously, any data that there is out there, which there hasn't been a whole lot of formal data on it, and then see if it could be evaluated by FDA to get on this list. So the way that the 503A and 503B is set up is 503B compounding pharmacies can only compound off list 1. Therefore, if FDA hasn't said, this is what you have, or this is going to go on list 1, then they're not allowing it to be compounded unless it's from an FDA approved finished product. I believe the only one on the 503B list, on list 1, that's a peptide would be Simorelin. So you would be able to theoretically get that in bulk and send that to physicians' offices. So, but I think that's really the only one that's on there, and it's quite difficult to get these on the list. That's where 503A facilities come in, because it's a lot more lenient, because they're not going to take enforcement action at this time of it not being on the list. So in the 503A, you have a little bit of a different rules. So it has to either have a USP or an F monograph, has to be like part of that FDA approved drug or on the bulks list. But FDA's come out with this, they've kind of alluded to in a couple different warning letters that as long as it's been nominated, they aren't going to take enforcement action against 503A compounding pharmacies. So this is how compounding pharmacies have been able to do it this far. Let's see, and I just went through all of that. So here are the categories between the 503A and 503B. So FDA has come up with these 3 different categories when they do update the list, by the way. So the list itself, it started, I believe, in 2012, and it's ongoing. People are continuing to nominate, but I personally have nominated things a couple years ago, and it still isn't on any list. So there's a very large backlog. FDA has acknowledged that, and they do say that they are working on it. We just haven't seen much movement on that. So the ones that they have been able to review, they have put on category 1, where they say, okay, there's enough information that's been provided from the person nominating it, saying that it's safe. There's some clinical need around it. There's some data generated, and some, additional data, for anecdotal data from physicians that have been included in it as well. So we'll put those on category 1, and that's what is allowed to be compounded. So you can take any of those active drugs off of those lists and use that in your compound. Category 2 is where they said, we looked at it, it doesn't look safe. That's a no-go. So you just don't touch category 2. And then category 3 is, well, we're acknowledging that it was nominated. We don't feel that we received sufficient evidence that it's a need or it's safe or anything. So please provide additional information. So of course, category 3 is quite a long list. So a lot of these have ended up on category 3. But I don't think I've seen any much peptide activity at all on any of the categories. I think that they're still in review to even get to decide which list that they even belong on. So the future for compounding pharmacies, this is a personal opinion, of course, just from being in the industry, talking with our other people in the industry and the regulatory agencies, I think there's going to be a huge increase in FDA oversight. They don't want another NECC. We don't want another NECC incident. But of course, one bad actor shouldn't ruin it for everybody either, because I mean, this happens in big pharma quite more often than it does in the smaller compounding pharmacy arena. So I agree that FDA oversight is definitely needed. There's some overstepping that is occurring, and then some boards of pharmacy are getting pretty aggressive as well. They're getting, they're really out there targeting a lot of compounders and making it their mission to get rid of peptides and make sure that patients don't have access to them, and for no good reason. There really isn't a reason out there that they can provide for that. I do think that there's going to be a decrease in the large scale 503A facilities. Like I talked about before, they get very difficult to manage when you have multiple state licenses. If, for example, if one state you don't report a pharmacist change within 24 hours, they discipline you and give you a fine, which you then have to report to all the other states. And then you see what's called reciprocal discipline, where multiple states pick it up and they start fining you and disciplining you. And then you report those, and then states will pick up those, and it just becomes a mess. So the longer you're around, the longer your rap sheet is, and the more difficult it is to manage because of the way that these boards have set up the whole process. And then there's going to be an implementation of USP 800 coming out. There is also updates to the USP 795 and 797. So that is going to rock the boat a little bit as well. We're not sure how yet. We've seen the latest revision, which is very aggressive with some of the beyond use dating. So that would shorten some of the product beyond use dating times. Like Amy was talking about before, APC is a great advocate in the industry. They have submitted quite a bit of appeals and responses on the industry's behalf to be able to appeal some of these aggressive guidances that are coming out, because although USP is it's a guidance, it's a resource, a lot of state boards reference it in their law as what needs to be followed by a compounding pharmacy. So we are subject to any changes that are made in those documents. So when that does come out, and it's not clear when, the latest comment period just closed, I believe last month. So whenever that does come out, that would affect us quite a bit as well. So you may see some shortening beyond use dates. You may see some additional testing requirements, which of course ultimately can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you could see an increase in prices. But these are where these people need to hear from physicians, and FDA, most importantly, and boards of pharmacy need to hear from physicians on how these peptides are affecting the community, how personalized medicine is the way of the future, and how to be able to protect this sort of innovative medicine for the patients out there, because limiting patient access is never the answer. It's just a trade-off for something else, as we all know. And then it's going to continually evolve. I think that FDA is in it, figuring it out. Board of Pharmacies figuring it out just as much as we're figuring it out on a daily basis. It just keeps changing. we're always on our toes, and we're just trying to roll with the punches and keep everyone as informed as we can of things that are happening. And it's just as much a pain for us as it is for our customers and their patients ultimately. So we're out there advocating for them and advocating for patients' access to medicine, because that's clearly what needs to be occurring in this industry. And that's where we're going to need a lot more physician involvement. And anyone that has any interest in that, and reach out to Amy. We have a lot of resources set up to where we can have some physicians, sign a petition. We have templates of letters and things that can be submitted to regulatory agencies. So it's very easy to do. We have petitions that and templates through APC where you can send them to members of Congress. So it's really important to be able to get the word out there and understand that it will have a very large impact on the community if anything were to happen to peptides.
If I could just interject real quick, and I don't want to throw you off your rhythm here, but I did share with everyone the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding's website. Right. And one of the things too, all the templates that Melissa's talking about that they have for you as a clinician to initiate to all your members of Congress in your states, but they also do provide you with templates for your patients. So if you've impacted a patient's life with some type of a compounded prescription, whether it's a peptide possibly, or maybe hormone replacement therapy is another thing that I know a lot of the, obviously A4M, we teach a lot about hormone replacement therapy. It's really great for those patients to also lobby their Congress and senators and give their stories of how their life was impacted by some type of compound and dosage form. So it's a great resource. I think I let all of you know in the chat that the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding is definitely the premier platform. They've been around for, I don't know, maybe 30 years now, fighting this battle to allow clinicians to continue to write for compounded prescriptions, to keep it, because there are those needs for lots of different reasons.
Yep. Exactly. I think that's the end of the presentation. I do see a couple questions. Amy, do you want me to just dive right into those?
Yeah, I mean, no surprise, we do have a little bit of questions about the California state regs. So if you want to talk a little bit about what what we know, why we know that some of that has to do just generally with sterile compounding, but a little bit with, the peptide piece as well.
Yeah, so California has made it, I can repeat this because they've made this public, but they've made it their mission to have this war against peptides. They don't want them coming into California. They don't want them shipped into there. They govern the compounding pharmacies. They don't govern the physicians themselves. So beyond sending them to, anywhere, any patients anywhere else, we are allowed to do that, but they are not allowed to be shipped into California. So that's been really detrimental to a lot of patients in California, especially for a lot of these peptides. I mean, that's a huge market for patients for, anti-aging or a lot of the, Florida, I'm currently in Florida, so I know that it's huge here for a lot of the aging population here. So I think some boards recognize the need for these types of medicines. California's just not one of them. They're going after the black and white of we're just not allowing these in here, and this is our law for that, and peptides can't be shipped into here. So unfortunately, that's limited a lot of patient access in California.
And generally, I don't think I'm misspeaking. I think California also just generally has some issues with sterile compounding generally, right? Like any type of sterile compounding too.
Yeah, so they're just a very difficult board to deal with. They don't particularly like compounding. They don't think there's enough. Personally, I think that they don't want to be the next Massachusetts Board of Pharmacy, who is governing NECC, New England Compounding Center. So I think that, no one wants to be that, of course, and no one wants to be that pharmacy either, but there's a disconnect there that, they're not ultimately thinking about the patient and the physician who has the authority to be writing what a treatment that they feel is going to treat their patient. That is a physician's call. That is not a board of pharmacy or an FDA's call. And that is where I do feel, and a lot of people that are lobbying in this industry, is there's a lot of overstep in regulatory because they're asking, what is the clinical need? And that's up to your physician. If the physician decides there's a clinical need, a pharmacist can't tell you that there's not. A lawyer cannot tell you that there is not. There's this really big gray area of what we're kind of battling right now with these regulatory agencies.
So I had one particular question here. Maybe you could talk just a little bit more, because I know you started the presentation off, but just kind of go back through again, 503B, as far as being able to be used for in-office type of things, or maybe you're shipping bulk to institutions versus 503A. Where that's more of a, it's a one-to-one. As I always say to Melissa, that's like you write a prescription for a patient and, the pharmacy is filling it. Can you just kind of walk back through that again?
Yeah. So in a 503A pharmacy, there isn't inventory typically sitting on the shelves. FDA limits you to anticipatory compounding, which is going to be based on your previous 30-day history. So whatever it is that you're compounding, you're not compounding a lot of it, and you're not keeping it on your shelf. So you get a prescription and then you're able to send it out. Whereas a 503B, you're creating a bunch of bulk. You have large batches. You have lots of different, vials or syringes or anything sitting on your shelves that you can then get a PO from a doctor, and they can order 100 units, they can order 1 unit, they can order 1,000, whatever it is that they want to stock their office with. That's something that they're able to do.
And that's, again, if you were with us, that's a big reason why Melissa was talking about all the, the various testing of products, of bulk products that 503B pharmacies have to go through. They have to really do the rigor of testing, sterility, the endotoxins, the bugs, all those types of things.
Right.
Let's see, what else do we have here? We've got several. Do you see the questions there?
I do. So one person is saying that they would like a little more clarification on the peptide aspect of amino acids.
Yep.
So what basically it's broken down this way. FDA has always said compounding pharmacies cannot compound biologics. So in order to kind of bring in peptides into that definition, they updated it and said that if you can't do, proteins fall under biologics, peptides do not. Peptides are going to be 40 amino acid chains sequence or less. And then if it's 41 amino acids or more, they're calling that a protein, which is a biologic, which you cannot do. So all of the peptides that we have at Wells are all 40 amino acids or less. And that's really an arbitrary number that they selected. They feel that it just becomes too complicated to compound. It's too complex. So, but really it's an arbitrary number that they've selected. There's no data surrounding that. I did have a question about sending into Nevada PO box.
Mm-hmm.
So from a 503, typically the peptides are coming from a 503A pharmacy.
Right.
503A products, they have to go to the end user. So they don't get stocked in an office. They can't go to PO boxes. They have to, the prescription is for John Doe. It needs to go to John Doe's home.
And then I don't know how far we want to go into the next, because I know this is something you and I have talked about, Melissa, but as far as the fact of, where you can, the supply chain of where you can get peptides, like if you're a Wells pharmacy, where are you getting your peptides? Because a lot of the, if I've got any pharmacists here on the webinar, you're using the typical suppliers such as PCCA, Fagron, Medisca, and a lot of those don't carry the peptides.
Right. So these are just compounding, in my opinion, they're compounding vendors. Medisca, for example, they don't make drug. They just repackage drug. So
Yeah.
your peptides are having to come from FDA approved or FDA registered manufacturers. So any API that we use comes from a manufacturer that is registered with the FDA, that has been through an inspection, that's part of our vendor qualification process. And we're getting those directly from those manufacturers. So we share the same manufacturers that Big Pharma uses. So it's not any different. We use all of those same manufacturers. They aren't dietary supplements. They are pharmaceutical grade ingredients. I think that just answered two questions at once.
I think so. I've got a little bit, let me see. I've got some things going on chat here. So someone wanted to know the latest on semaglutide for weight loss. Do you have any comment on that?
Semaglutide is under patent. So I don't think that compounders can do semaglutide for weight loss until 2032, I believe. So I know that some are. I know some got a cease and desist recently. I know that, but there are some legal things that some are able to do it. I'm not sure. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not able to really comment beyond that. But I do know that semaglutide is under patent for 12 years.
I know, and Melissa, this is one of the things we were talking about again before we went live, and we were talking about it more in relation to BHRT. But since you do have a little bit with some of the committee work that you're doing with APC, I know we had a comment here about just for also sharing outcome data collection. Do you know anything that's going on there? I can't speak from the peptide side. While we haven't started it, we are working on as far as data outcome, this is for patient cases, the ability, if you're an IPS member, to complete a form that's on the membership side. If you want to share a case, like a successful outcome, that's kind of a small step that we're planning to start doing as far as peptides go. But just generally, do you have any comment just on outcome data collection?
I'm not really familiar with it, to be honest. I don't know. I know that it's being collected, but as far as like the outcome of it, I think we're still a ways away from seeing anything being decided. I think I could speak a lot more on the hormones because we have had that NASEM study. And then we've had an independent review of that NASEM study. So there has been a lot of data collection there, but showed that it was quite skewed. So I don't think that we've really seen any true unbiased data as of yet. But I do know that it is being collected. I do know that FDA has recently put out a couple different, I know USP, for example, is looking at committee members to create monographs for biologics. Like, FDA is creating a panel for, I believe, for peptides, pharmacology. So they're creating a panel of experts there. So it's on their radar. It's in the works, but I don't know anything about any outcomes as of yet.
Okay, let's see. So I know I've got one, and I'm not going to go into it a lot here, but because I think I've got a couple questions here, there's some information I can send out. It seems like some of you are asking, where are some pharmacies where you can get, order peptides, or at least be able to talk to that particular compounding pharmacy a little bit more, like known pharmacies that do peptides. So as a for instance, while Melissa's not a pharmacist, she definitely has the regulatory background, but her pharmacy, Wells Pharmacy, they do compound peptides. And I do have a list of a few others. Things that you have to keep in mind, and Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, so some of the pharmacies that I may send out a list to all of you who are on here, when I send the recording out to everyone, It may be that they don't ship into your state, so that's something to keep in mind. It may be that they compound, but maybe they only have the ability to ship in 27 states in the US. So those would be some things to keep in mind when you call a compounding pharmacy. The list that I'm going to send out to you of known pharmacies that I know that do compound peptides. Do you have any other comment on that, Melissa?
No, that's exactly
okay.
Right.
Let's see. I've got a question here. Can a 503A pharmacy compound, and I know I'm not going to say this, gonadorelin in Florida?
I believe that we're doing that. So,
okay.
Yes.
I think I know this answer, but I'm going to throw it to you. You mentioned Samoralin can be sold bulk to docs. What about a topical GHK, the CU plus peptide? Can it be sold bulk to an office?
I don't believe that's on the list, but that's off the top of my head. And I haven't looked at the list in a little while just because it doesn't change ever. Yeah. And there's a lot on there. So, but it's super easy to look it up. If you just Google FDA bulk drug substance list 503B, which would be for office stock, you can see list category 1, 2, and 3. And then to see everything that's been nominated that hasn't made it to a category or on the list at all, you would go to the docket, the federal docket, and take a look at the nominations for 503B bulk compounding drug substances. But it's not user friendly. It's not searchable. You literally have to go into each nomination and open each and every PDF. So not recommended.
This is a kind of a general question. What about in-house compounding of dietary supplements for physicians to have in their practice? Does 503 apply to them? I think that would be more 503B, but what are your thoughts, Melissa?
Let me scroll down to that.
It's in chat, nodding. I don't think it's in.
I see it.
Okay, you see it?
Yeah. What about the compounding of dietary supplements by physicians in their practices? Does 503A apply to them? No. So I believe that there's a guidance for this. The FDA came out with about physician compounding. So there is a separate physician compounding kind of guidance and regulation for doctors. And it's very light compared to what we have to go through. Of course, I'm assuming this is a non-sterile compounding dietary supplement, so that it would be very easy for a physician to do. I do believe that it's limited. There's a limited quantity, but I'm not really familiar with it just because we're not physicians compounding, but I do know it exists. So I highly recommend looking that up and making sure that you have all your ducks in a row for that.
And definitely there was a mention, again, I'm going to go back to the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. They are starting a data collection tool for hormone replacement therapy. And they have discussed peptides. That was another conversation Melissa and I were having before we started. I happened to be on a call today that was with the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding and a few other the NCPA group, and a few clinicians were on the phone and talking about ways to ensure that this data collection is successful. Again, to continue to lobby for the right for clinicians to compound hormone replacement therapy seems to be on the radar of FDA right now. And I don't want to go into great detail on that, but I think that all of these organizations are taking all the right steps to collect this data, again, to preserve the right for all of you to, treat your patients the very best way that you can so that you have the most successful outcomes.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do we have any more questions? Oh, yeah. I'm going to go back to the Q&A side.
Yeah, there's a couple there.
Yeah. You can go ahead if you see them.
Okay. One of them is, what are my thoughts on peptide sciences? Because patients are using them. So peptidesciences.com, they've got a great website. They've got a great disclaimer that it's for research purposes only, not for pharmaceutical use. And if you look up their address, it'll take you on Google Maps to a post office. So who are these people? Where are they getting these medications? Where are they compounding them? Where are they being sold on Amazon as injectable products? It's a very scary world out there, and I highly recommend nobody uses something that you can get to inject that is, you can buy off Amazon or buy without a prescription, because it's really dangerous. This can be very dangerous. And unfortunately, FDA can't find these people. They do look for them. There's a couple of them out there. There's one that has another, their address is an accounting office in the UK. And I do know that they have caught a couple, and they're in prison for it. So it's a scary world out there, and highly recommend people not doing that, not going to them.
I know that's you talk a little bit about that in your lecture in our peptide module 1, about some of these companies out there.
Yeah.
And to be wary of buying peptides. And obviously we know that patients can directly through some of these resources or sources.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I know that, here's one. Any word on, I'm not going to, tesofensine? So bad at saying these.
I'm actually not familiar with that particular one. Was there something that FDA took that off the list, or how did that, if you have more information, maybe I could shoot you you can shoot me an email offline and we can go over that, but I'm not really familiar with that one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not either. Let's see. I don't know. Is there anything new on the horizon as far as weight loss for peptide, or what do you typically see at Wells that clinicians might be using as far as a peptide for weight loss?
Still Smorelin. I think people are still using that. I know HCG was taken away back when FDA updated the biologics guidance. They specifically named out HCG and said that can no longer be compounded. So I think a lot of people have moved over to, I know that a lot of pharmacies were doing the semaglutide, but I think that Smorelin is still a really big seller for that as well.
So I know one of the questions here, or that was in chat that someone asked as far as about additional education, will mention that the International Peptide Society, with the support of the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, we do offer a peptide certification course. I can send a link through the chat. I'll make sure that when I do the follow-up email to sending out the on-demand recording, let you all know, what that course is, what, sort of the curriculum is. It is offered both, the modules that we offer are offered in person. So if you wanted to attend in person, or they are available online, for online learning. And they're really good. I think we've done a really good job. We relaunched the peptide certification last fall, and we're trying to do it very responsibly in making sure that everybody understands, these regulatory issues. Again, Melissa actually kicks off the first module that we have. So to lay this foundation of, kind of understanding what's available and what's out there. And then we've got a really great faculty of clinicians who are in practice, seeing patients every day, and, using peptides. A lot of what we talk about is using peptides as an adjunct therapy. Like, maybe they're not responding, or they're non-responders for whatever your typical therapy might be. And that, can get some great outcomes by just adding some peptide therapy in there. We've shown some remarkable case studies in the course, specifically with some wound therapy and just the healing properties that can take place for some of these folks who have, had some major wound healing issues. Again, peptides are big in the cosmetic industry, so we do cover that from an aesthetic medicine standpoint. Some really great outcomes, not having to do, all the needle injections too with your patients. So it's a good course. It's 2 modules, 3 days each, so 24 hours, 48 hours of learning between the 2 modules. I know we had some chat here. So, yep, I love having pharmacists here on the webinar with us. So we've got Sahar Swadan, who everybody may or may not know is very instrumental in our education at A4M. She indicated that the testophensin is in phase 3 clinical trials for obesity right now.
That's great.
So we have, so Melissa, you might be able to talk a little bit before we jump off of here. Somebody's asking about BPC 157, which is a pretty common, yeah.
So yeah. I can speak from a personal experience on this one. So we do compound BPC 157, and I do have a story. And I was walking down my stairs at home a couple years ago, and I heard the dreaded snap of my Achilles. It was just a very minor tear, but of course, any sort of trauma to your Achilles kind of puts you out of commission of walking. So I injected in my lower calf for about 2 weeks. After 4 days, I could walk again. It was like, it's seriously a miracle. So I have a friend that's an orthopedic surgeon that got really interested in it as well and started using it too, because he saw my results and thought how incredible that was. So it is something that we do have, but it is patient specific.
Yeah, you saw that come in. Yep, that's what I was going to say. It is a patient specific.
Right, because it does have to come out of a 503A pharmacy.
Okay.
By the way, I do want to mention that pharmacies are not the only ones that can nominate for the bulk drug substance lists. I have seen multiple physicians nominate as well. So in the event that you feel very strongly about something that hasn't been nominated, and I have a good pulse on a lot of things that have been nominated, so I'm happy to speak with anybody that's interested, but I've seen a lot of physicians nominate products to get on there so that compounders can do them.
So this is a good question. I don't know how much detail you can go into. And hi, Dr. Nario, for this question. He's wanting to know what's the difference between compounded BPC oral versus the pre-made BPC oral, which I know Integrated Peptides offers that in a capsule form.
I think it's all, I'm not familiar with the other version, but I think it's all the same. I mean, I think we all use the same API, so it's just different variations.
Do you compound BPC oral at Wells? Yeah. You do? Okay. So possible differences might be just fillers, right? Would you say possibly?
It could be that. It could be the potency that could be different as well. So it just really depends.
Let's see. I don't know. So I don't know if Dr. Mills, if this is in relation to peptides. He's asking if do troches and creams or tablets work as well to get around the injection piece.
I do think that they work well. So I know that our formulation pharmacist, he's really great. His name is Tony Campbell. He spoke about this at the A4M in Nashville recently, and Dr. Lavelle has talked about this, about BPC being taken orally and how that typically, I mean, you're not targeting a specific area at that point. You're targeting more of the inflammation of your gut, which I think is, it really is more of a systemic release in your entire body to kind of prevent that inflammation, more as like the injection piece. And I am not a physician and I am not a pharmacist. This is just coming from what I've heard being spoken. Is the injection is more targeted for a particular, like a tear or inflammation in a particular joint or something of that nature. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. I do think it's a weaker route. Obviously, injection is always more targeted and more concentrated, but it definitely does help.
So any comment on thymulin peptides?
No comment. We do make TB4, so.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's like 38 amino acids.
Okay, I think, let me see if I've got any more here on Q&A. Is it safe for patients to bring in the peptides that they order for them and then be injected if it cannot be delivered to their clinic?
Yes.
I get that. So if it goes directly to the patient, I get that, and the patient's not comfortable doing the injection.
Sure.
They definitely can do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only thing is that FDA, DEA, boards of pharmacy, they just require, if it comes from a prescription, it has to go directly to that patient. And they even got so detailed. I mean, there were times that we were like, well, what if we ship it to the physician's office? They sign that they picked it up there and that sort of thing. And they said, you'd have to have them on camera receiving it from UPS, and you'd have to have it all like it just became a mess. So that's the regulation around that. So yeah, absolutely. They can bring it in, and certainly I believe that there should be a lot of training around performing injections. Personally, it's not something that a lot of people are comfortable with, that they understand. Yeah. I know that this is just a personal kind of thing that happened. I was at a car wash one time and I was paying, and the girl at the register was on the phone and super frustrated. She was on hold, and I saw a bunch of medication in front of her, and I said, is there something I can help you with? She's like, I've just been trying to call this pharmacy. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to give this to my elderly dad and all these things. And it was actually, I think it was HCG, and she had to reconstitute it, and there were no directions or anything. And it didn't come with an alcohol pad. It didn't come with any of these things. And she's like, okay, do I reuse this syringe? And I'm like, no, like,
no.
This is like, it just, people don't understand it. And I think it's really appropriate to bring them in to do the training. And we do that with a lot of our ICP products, our ED drugs, because that certainly is something that's a sensitive area to be injecting in the first place. So I think that we do ship it to the physician's office for the first time for that patient, so that the patient can be titrated in the office, understand their dose, and understand how to properly do it, because that you can very easily puncture your urethra with a needle and cause a lot of bleeding and issues. So that's something that I think that's really important. And that's a patient-physician relationship that should occur. Yes.
So I don't know, Melissa, how much you might get into this, but I know we were getting a little bit of comment on, potential side effects of peptides. Anything that you see there?
I can't comment on that just because I don't personally know anything about that. I'm not part of the clinical side of things. I'm more on the regulatory. Right.
That's a great question. Potentially if you're taking the peptide course or anything like that, right. Our faculty could potentially, our clinician faculty could probably go into a little bit more about what potential side effects, how they may counsel the patient because of those side effects.
Yeah. I personally haven't heard of any side effects. And we've been doing peptides for quite some time, and we haven't had anybody calling and complaining about any side effects besides the normal injection side effects of, pain
just
around the injection site and things like that. But no, beyond that, we haven't had very many or any that I can even think of.
All right. Well, I think we're done. I think that's all the questions. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. It was a good questions, good conversation. This is a good topic. As I said at the start, this is probably a topic that will continue to almost repeat. I know we did sort of a similar presentation, not exactly the same, back in the fall. And I talked to Melissa and told her I felt like we continue to get enough questions that we need to kind of keep hitting this topic, for all of you who are interested in peptides or don't understand, or even in just general, just understanding, the 503A, 503B piece of compounding pharmacies, and working with your own local community compounding pharmacy, or perhaps you're working with a compounding pharmacy that's out of state but is able to ship to your patients too. So We will probably run this again, I don't know, in probably 3 months again, Melissa. So,
Okay.
but definitely appreciate everybody participating. And again, the questions were great. Keep in mind, we'll send out the on-demand recording again in a day or two. We'll get the slides out to you as well. And I will send a list of the compounding pharmacies that, at least with International Peptide Society, that we're putting out as far as recommendations for you to work with. So thanks everybody for joining us.